Good morning. It's been such a great morning already. I'm Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, and it is one of my great privileges to confer the Library of Congress's Prize for American Fiction each year during the National Book Festival. The Prize for American Fiction recognizes and celebrates writers, their body of work, and the power of their words. And the author we are honoring today has built quite an outstanding collection of books that have pierced through the American psyche and culture. James McBride. Is a best-selling and award-winning author of books we all know and adore. From his debut novel, Miracle at Santa Ana, and his current bestseller, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. His beautiful words and his sharp wit have captivated readers with his exceptional stories and rather unforgettable characters like Sport Coat from Deacon King Kong and John Brown from The Good Lord Bird, where he expertly blended fiction and history. I, like many of you, were first introduced to him with his book, The Color of Water. And it has become one of my all-time favorites. It beautifully shows the power of family and a mother's love, something we can all relate to. In fact, that's the reason my 92-year-old mother is here today, to see James McBride. And maybe that's his superpower. Whether it's in his words or in his music, he connects diverse people to his thought-provoking and poignant art, taking us on an emotional joyride through his stories. James also said, when he was told about this award, that he wished his mother was here today to see him ascend to the top of the literary mountain. So let's all give him a warm embrace. As we honor him with the 2024 Library of Congress Prize for American Fiction, the brilliant James McBride. Somebody said, I love it. That's right, we love it. So thank you, James, for accepting. And now we are having a special treat because James is going to be in conversation with NPR's Michelle Martin.
They got a lot of people here. See, we don't normally see eyes when we work, so it's a little different. So I take it that Mr. McBride has a few fans. Would that be? Okay, but let's do a little. Any newbies here? Anybody not familiar with the work? Okay, well that'll change. Let me ask you though, audience. Okay. What's your favorite? The Color of Water? Anybody? Miracle at St. Anna? Oh, okay. All right, I'm gonna skip. The Good Lord Bird? Anybody? Okay. Kill 'Em and Leave? Hit 'em and leave, okay. That's one of my favorites. 5 Carat Soul, anybody? Okay. Deacon King Kong. Just trying to understand where we're all coming from here. You got a few fans here. How does it feel? Like I say, most of the time we do our work by ourselves, right? So how is this landing with you, all this?
Well, I wish I would worn some longer socks so people can't see my ankles. But I mean, it's nice. I mean, it's this kind of thing doesn't happen very often, and it's nice to. It's good. I mean, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to say.
Okay. All right, well, let's keep going. Because, we first thought of you as a creator. I mean, look, you went to journalism school. You worked at the Washington Post. Actually, we kind of overlapped there, although we never saw each other, because I was in the Metro section and you were at Style section, so you were in High Cotton. I was just out here doing police blotter. But I think creatively, you kind of first thought of yourself as a saxophone player, correct? Would that be
right?
As a musician, right?
A musician, yeah.
So when did you say to yourself, I'm a writer?
Well, probably after I left the Post. I left the Post, it was 89 maybe, or 90. I came to New York, and I left the Post, I can't remember, I think it was maybe 88. And then went to New York, and I became a full-time musician for several years. And during that time, I wrote The Color of Water. And when I wrote The Color of Water, I made so much money from writing the book, maybe I should stop playing these gigs, because traveling and going out and going to Gary, Indiana in a van and coming back with $5, and everything I had was made in the truck stop, So I just realized that I had a talent for writing. I mean, I realized I had a talent for it before, but I started taking it more seriously, I guess, after I left the Post, because creatively, fiction started to show itself.
I was going to ask about that because the first mark you made was with memoir, was with The Color of Water, which to this day, I mean, I think people still read it in school, right? Right? It's finding its audience over and over again. People seem to find it when they need to find it, right? But it's memoir. So when did the fiction start to show itself?
Well, I always liked fiction, even as when I was a student at Oberlin. In fact, when I realized I had a talent for writing, I had a teacher named Tom Taylor he was like an adjunct, or he was visiting. Still remember his name, and I wrote a story in this class. I had to go in a class because I wasn't really up to speed. So Oberlin, which is, I'm very grateful to that school, where they had a class where if you didn't up to speed, they would get you to speed. And I had to write a story in that class, and I wrote a story, and afterwards he said, you have a talent for this. And I said, because the story I wrote was about a guy who went to the bathroom and sat on the toilet and had a heart attack. But he had a flashback, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I don't know what he saw in that, but I was, I'm hoping he didn't see everything that I was seeing. But so I guess I just always started writing creatively, but none of it was any good. I was talking about this morning. I went to see the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. when I was a reporter at the Post. In fact, I took my 2 nephews there, and after we left, one of my nephews, he was so upset by seeing the animals that I wrote a story called Mr. Whippy and the Wind, which is part of the short story collection in 5 Carat Soul, which I see like 8 people read, but I
read it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
God bless you.
Loyal. Loyal
In any
fan.
case, so I've always been creative in music. Journalism wasn't creative enough for me, and also fiction allows your dreams to come true, whereas journalism doesn't. Although, like, it's starting to a little bit now, but that's a whole nother thing. I will say this, as a mixed race person, well, first of all, if you can name me one African American who's not mixed, I'll give you $100 right now. But, for years when The Color of Water came out, and when I was growing up, we were way out. We were considered way out. You and I, we grew up around the same time. you know, mixed race family in those days was just something that was very unusual, but in the black community was easily accepted. So I'm happy to see that, and you know, in a lot of ways my success is predicated on the fact that people are starting to see the reality that I've always known, which is that what difference does it make? Really, in the grand scheme of things. So that's probably why I'm here and why I'm getting this $10,000, you know? I mean,
Wait, they paid you? What? Wait, what?
no, look, I'm not here.
Soundproof another room.
I've made enough money. I'm here because I want to be here.
Yeah.
And because I respect librarians and the Library of Congress.
And all your fans who want to see you, of whom there seem to be quite a few.
This is a little bit, this is upsetting because if these people think I'm smart, something's wrong. So I'm not going to say anything, I mean, but.
I want to talk about the thing about your work, and one of the people, I know you don't read your reviews, but one of the people who wrote a review of one of your books talked about how he was reading the book on the subway and was laughing out loud, and everybody kept looking at him like, what's wrong with you? And has anybody, have y'all done that? Have you ever done that? Is the voices in your books are all so different. Does that, you know, I mean, they all have their own voice. Like I was rereading Good Lord Bird when I realized that we were going to be talking. I reread it and I wanted to read it as opposed to watching the film, which was hilarious, but still, the voices are so distinct. I'm like, how do these voices come to you?
I mean, you know, I just happen to be the person in the room that holds a handkerchief when God coughs, honestly. I like people. You know, I listen to people. Part of my job is to listen to people. And I appreciate people so much, and I happen to look to the kindness in people. And when you look to the kindness in people, you see their depth. And so there's no bad people to me. And if you appreciate people, music helps you a lot. Because music forces you to listen. And so when I teach writing to my students, I often make them listen to music. And I make them walk around and watch and see. Because, you know, everywhere you go, everywhere I go, I always carry a notebook. I carry it everywhere. You know, I always carry a notebook. Because people are just handing me money when they talk. So I always have a notebook, I always have pens.
You got anything in there? Let me see. I want to see what's in
well,
there.
I mean, just ignore the grocery list and stuff.
Okay.
I mean, like,
Let's
all right.
hand it over. Pay for, okay, solution for tree. Addressed to Frame for Rush Picks. Yeah, I co-sign that.
Well,
I could see it. I can, vitamins, I'm not going to ask about that. Set, okay, all right.
Wait a minute, no, well, I'll give you the good section here. Because this book is a bit of an anomaly because I just graduated to a bigger book.
Mm-hmm.
So salsa is what comes out of Goya cans. That's what I heard someone say. And here's some types of music, of Latin music. Zutlan, Montua, Mambo, Montuno, Mona, Mortunia, the original tambo 3-string guitar with strings G, C, E. See, I mean, this is useless to people. But if I'm writing about Latin music, because I heard just a gifted arranger. There was a workshop I was at, and this Latin cat. When I say Latin, I mean, with all due respect, Chicano. I don't know what he was, but he was Puerto Rican, and we say in New York.
Right.
He definitely was Puerto Rican.
Right.
But his language, his use of these terms was just fascinating, because he figured out that all the African parts that came into so-called Latin, he had worked it out. He was a big fat guy, bad dude. I mean, he was obese. But so I just learned something, so I wrote it in my little book. But I just graduated to a bigger book, because I usually keep sayings in one section, names in another section, and incidents that happen in another section. And then there's a little section with, I go to the grocery store and get you know.
Get frames for the rush picks. But you know, there was nobody you could consult to hear how a 19th century abolitionist vigilante could talk, right? Or an escaped, or not escaped, he wasn't really escaped. You all remember the story of Good Lord Bird. It focuses on Onion, and he gets that name because it's a whole thing about how he gets that name. And he encounters John Brown, and John Brown liberates him, and it's told through him. And it's sort of based on, you know, the real John Brown, but it's hilarious. And I'm just trying to think, how could you figure out that like this John Brown who was hanged for trying to start an insurrection against slavery could be hilarious? I mean, that part.
Well, I mean, life is how you look at it. I mean, if you can get over the fact that, you know, we've had, you know, in the last, you know, from 2016 to 2020, we had some awful things happen. I'll put it this way. In my church, you know, my pastor happens to be here. Not my pastor. I like when people say, my pastor. He's not your pastor, buddy. Okay? You cut it out. But the people that I grew up knowing and that you grew up knowing, they always saw the bright side of stuff. They knew they were powerless to do stuff. You know, they knew the mayor didn't care and that the city councilmen were just rascals, most of them, you know, in those days anyway. So they just learned to laugh, because learning to laugh is a way of survival. And so even with John Brown, as ridiculous and as crazy as he was, because Calvinists are a little bit crazy, but everyone has a point. I mean, what's funnier than watching two Arab guys argue over the cost of a brake job? I mean, that's, you know, in Punjab, whatever this language they're speaking, not Punjab, but you get it. So it's just that's how you see it. And so I grew up in a family and in a community where laughter was really the best medicine. And so I just try to put it into my books, you know.
What's interesting too is, you know, a lot of people who write fiction, they start with memoir and then they build out. So you started with memoir, but then your next projects were very different from your life. Like you know, unless you...
Well, you can't write the same, I mean, you can't write the same book again and again. I know some writers do that, you know, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in growth. I want to change, I want to evolve, you know. I'm always trying to figure out what's the next. You know, I'd love to write a book where you open it up and the characters pop out and they talk to each other, and then you're allowed to insert yourself into it, and then you turn the page, and I mean, I'm trying to get, I can't stop being creative, you know? I feel like I'm limited, really, by books and music, because there's no real, neither side, music and the music industry and the publishing industry, they really don't understand each other. They don't know what to do with someone like me. I'm not your typical writer who just writes the same book about detectives or whatever, and someone gets killed. I'm always thirsty for something, and music is the same way. I'm always looking for something new and a different sound, and I've never found a comfortable place there. Books is that's just part of who I am. I'm just a creative person, you know, I'm just under the umbrella of creativity and storytelling, which has evolved to, in some ways that are good, in some ways that are not good. 10-second stories in TikTok don't really, that's not story, that's just film. And blogs and YouTube channels are that's not even typing, you know? So I'm trying to figure out ways to engage people so that when someone tells their story, that it has some purpose to help someone else.
We're gonna invite you into the conversation, although with this many people here, I'm not sure how many people we can get to the mic, so I don't want to make it a fitness contest, but we're gonna start in about 10 minutes. We're gonna invite you to sort of join us, and we're gonna talk for about 10 minutes with your questions, and then I'm gonna come back to Mr. McBride so he can give us a closing thought or a benediction or whatever it is you wanna leave us with, my pastor. And so, okay, I'm gonna glide a little bit past Deacon King Kong, even though I love Deacon King Kong so much, because Mr. McBride mentioned that we kind of grew up in a similar neighborhood in a similar time, and Deacon King Kong is about everybody I grew up with. Like, if y'all have read it, it's about every crazy person that I grew up with, that we grew up with. But I'm gonna glide past it because I want to get to the latest book, because I think most of the people here have probably read that. That's the one they're most familiar with. Love This Too I felt like when I read it and when I heard you talk about it, that you'd actually been carrying this story with you for some time. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. And part of it because when I worked at a camp for disabled or so-called differently abled kids, it changed my life. And that camp was run by a man who was, you know, in those years, and was gay and had to hide it. And he changed my life and the life of all of the people who worked at the camp. That camp was kind of like a United Nations. It was outside Philly. It was called Variety Club Camp for Handicapped Children. It was started by theater owners, Jewish theater owners, for Jewish kids with polio. Then they opened it up to anybody with polio. And then they opened it up to anybody who was so-called differently abled. And a lot of those kids, I'm still in touch with like 3 of them now. And so I always wanted to write about it and write about him. But every time I wrote about it, it just was like sappy and it was corny. But the only chapter that worked, and I wrote several chapters, you know, but the only chapter that worked was the chapter about the guy who kind of started the camp, or whose life inspired the camp, which was Moshe. When I got to Moshe, and then, you know, Chona, his wife, you know, well, wife-to-be, or Hannah, if you want to get all technical, when they got involved and they fell in love, then the story just, you know, the plane took off the runway.
What made this the time to bring that story forward? Since, like I say, you had been carrying pieces of it with you. Why do you think it presented itself when it did?
There's no time. It's just, you know, that's the thing with fiction. Fiction, you just go around gathering information, and then it comes when it's supposed to. So that was just God coming into the room. I mean, I was going to see Pennhurst. I said it initially in Pottsville, PA, which is in western PA near Pittsburgh. But then I was going to see Pennhurst, which is the old institution where they house disabled children. Again, remember, I wanted to write about a child or children who were disabled or differently able and what happens to them. So I was going to see Pennhurst, which is closed, but I went to see it anyway, and I saw a sign that said Pottstown. So I said, well, you know, Pottsville, Pottstown, you know, tomato, whatever. So I drove into Pottstown, and I looked around, I said, this is perfect. It, you know, it still looked a little bit like it might have looked in the 30s, and then I started doing research. And I said, I'll set it here, right down the road from Pennhurst, and the rest just came from research and my imagination. You know, seeing there was an old Jewish synagogue there was a Baptist church, still there, building's still there, everything's different now, and then I just called on, you know, the gods of imagination to allow these characters to inhabit my brain. And then they begin to take off, and then you follow them once they get moving. I remember when writers used to say this when I was young, they'd say, my characters I'm following her, and I go, yeah, right, buddy, yeah. And I got a bridge I want to say you too, sucker. But it's true, at a certain point, the characters start to take, you know, they start to move. And in the case of this book, with Moshe and Shona, when he fell in love with her, and she began to inhabit the pages, the other characters from her life began to emerge. Nate and Addie, you know, the black couple, and of course Dodo, and then later on Monkey Pants, the kid in the institution. And I knew kids like Dodo and Monkey Pants. I knew them. I know what a kid with cerebral palsy looks and sounds like. Cerebral palsy is interesting. I don't know what they call it now, but you know, you're talking to someone with cerebral palsy, and they sound like they don't know what they're talking about. They actually, oftentimes, are much smarter than you are. I mean, people who are disabled or differently able, in their fingernail, they hold more experience and wisdom sometimes than most of us.
Why is that?
Because they spend their life watching. Being disabled is a little bit like being black, you know, where you know, you're like a witness to your own lynching, where everyone gets to make a speech about you but you. So you're there in a wheelchair and they're talking over your head. Oh, well, she wants to go, you know, but she doesn't like. Meanwhile, in your mind, you're saying, you know, why, you have a booger in your nose, that one, and spit's flying out your mouth, and they're telling me, you know, because you see it all. And when you're working with kids, they let you know. You know, I remember Joe Frazier came to visit the camp one time, the heavyweight boxer. And he went up to one of the kids, and he was like, hey, little sonny, you know, and this kid said to him, he looked up and he said, I could kick your ass. I mean, You can't make this kind of stuff up.
Right.
So, you know, when you, if your job is to find the humanity in people, look to the differently able. That's why their parents have a special shine. Of course, they, you know, and they have difficulty. I was talking about, you know, one of your ex-colleagues who writes for the Post. I forgot his last name. He's the book reviewer. I can't remember his name. I met him. Charles.
Ron Charles.
Ron Charles. And Alyssa Charles, his daughter, and the struggles that he had to raise her, and how and this guy, he's one of the heroes. He's walking around here, him and his wife. These are the people that are the heroes in my world. And that's what gives me power in my writing, because I mean, my heroes aren't the congressman and, well, I mean, soon to be president might be a hero. I mean, I'm not gonna lie now, I mean, but there's power in love. There's power in mothers, especially, and fathers, as you know. But the power of mothers is great. And so I grew up in that kind of, you know, thing, with kind of mentality, and it's helped me in my life.
For folks who haven't read the book yet, the three of you here who have not, it takes place in this town. It's supposed to be in Pennsylvania. Really a town that does exist, but it's maybe not that town, where the Black community and the Jewish community are intertwined. And it centers initially on this Jewish couple who run a theater, but then they rally along with their Black neighbors to try to save this little boy from being sent to this institution. And then things happen, you know, from there. And I will say, because I don't want to ruin the experience for those of you who haven't read it yet, that it takes a sharp turn. You start out and you're sitting on the metro and you're laughing your head off, and then some things happen, and it takes a sharp turn that really makes you face a lot of the things that disabled people have to deal with, that anybody who's living kind of on the margins has to deal with. And some and I'm just going to leave it at that. And I'm just asking, I'm kind of wondering was that turn always there, and why did you feel it was necessary?
Well, I mean,
Did y'all don't know what I'm talking about? Those of you that have read the book, I just don't want to ruin it for people who haven't read it yet. It's bracing. It's one of those things that kept me up in a good way, kept me up at night in a good way. Like, you know, you ever finish a book and you think, whew, I can't sleep now. I'll go clean out the closet because I can't sleep now. And it disturbed me in a very good way. But I wanted to ask about that.
Well, in this world, anything is possible. You know, what happens is in fiction, you know, you expect it to move in a direction. It doesn't go that way. It just sort of happens. So once Moshe and Shona got together, I began to follow the story, knowing that Dodo had to be introduced into their lives at some point. And you're waiting for the moment to, as this narrative starts to spin out from your fingers, you can't force the kid into place. He's got to, you know, it has to be, you know, you're building a house. And so as the house gets built and as these things start to roll out, you just simply have to go with what's there. And you don't want to force things into place, and you don't want to not let things happen that are just supposed to be. I mean, you know, my father died before I was born. That wasn't an ideal thing, but it worked out. If you're patient, you know, and if you believe in love, everything will work out. So the hard part is you have to believe in love. You know, if you really believe, it'll show in your work. And if you don't, then it's called pulp fiction. You know, which means that it's like eating a peppermint candy. It tastes good, but if you eat too many, it's no good. You know. So.
So
I ought to hand you a candy cane.
I was going to say, no. So is anything keeping you up at night now? Like, you've had such an incredible ride. Is something keeping you up at night?
Well, we have some issues with the church, you know, developer, you know, that's keeping me up, you know. I feel like, you know, I put it this way, one person can't change anything in this country, in your community. It takes a community. But our inability to talk to each other within our communities is really destructive, because it just causes a lot of fear. And we all know what fear does. Fear exploits us, allows the big boys and big companies and everything to destroy neighborhoods completely. So if anything keeps me up, it's the idea that the harbingers of truth and the people who are at the last line of defense, which are librarians and teachers, are brutally assaulted by mostly by men and women who don't know any better. But then what helps me sleep at night is that the wisdom of women is starting to make its way into American life. Because, and I'll make this point before we allow, women keep secrets in their heart. Women are much more sophisticated. I learned this mostly from the black women in my church. Because, when I got divorced, I returned to the church, and, long story short, I saw how things go in the black church, at least in my church. In a lot of churches, women carry the whole thing. They carry the whole thing, and then they lay it at a man's feet and say, tell us what to do. They're carrying the whole thing now. But the level of sophistication that's in a woman's heart, because their heart is like a vault, and they keep everything there, and they very rarely open it up. But every once in a while, they open that vault and let some wisdom out. It just moves the world. So we're excited to get some of that wisdom into our national thinking. And so that helps me sleep at night, because I'm convinced that women are going to be the force that moves us into the future.
And with that, come on up. We have, I think there's some microphones. I see one there. I see one there. Come on up and join us, visit. Okay, come on up. Go ahead, let's start.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here today and just excited that I can listen to you and know a little bit behind the book. So I just finished reading Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, and I thought, what a fabulous book. Had so many themes to it. It was just, the theme of love. Moshe's love for Shauna, and her love for the community. I mean, she did not want to move. She loved her community. So love is one of the prevailing things in that book, and I thought it was so well written. All characters were so well developed. It was just, I didn't want it to end, and that's how I know it's a good book.
Well, thank
If
you.
I don't want a book to end, it's like, okay, I need more.
Did you have a question you wanted to ask? You just wanted to holler. No, it's fine. No, it's fine. You're adults. You don't have to ask a fake question just because you want to holler. It's fine. But I have a question on top of that. If you wanna, which is.
So
go ahead.
So it has the Jewish and the black, and that's your heritage. Your mom is Jewish, and so was it part of your mom in your life that made you go in that direction as well?
Well, I mean, to some degree. I mean, she grew up in a small town in Virginia, grocery store. It was in the black section of town. And that really was a big part of American life in the 30s and 40s in black sections. A white person, not always Jewish, but oftentimes Jewish, who had a store in the black section of town, who knew their community, everyone knew everyone. It's like today, we always read about what goes wrong. We never read about what goes right. And in all the travels I've done for the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, it's been a lot. I meet a lot of people who tell me, my community was like that too. I met a lady in Detroit who told me all about her store, and she said when her father closed the store, she said it was awful for all of us. Louis Armstrong talks about that when he grew up in New Orleans and how kind. I think there's a misperception about, and I know for the 3 Jewish people here, this is gonna be tough. But Judaism, I studied a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, enough to know that one of the great principles of Judaism is not unlike that of Christianity or the Quran, which is that you're supposed to give. It's ironic that Jews are stereotyped as cheap, when in fact, Judaism is really based on Again, now every Jewish person is an expert on Judaism. So if you're going to come get your book signed, please don't bother me with this. Judaism is about giving, and I've experienced that the majority of my life in New York. For those of us who grew up in New York, we had Jewish teachers, we had Jewish bus drivers, now Jewish people are not perfect by no means, but the stereotypes that we lay on communities is destructive for all of us. It's like saying, you know, when you say urban centers, they're guerrillas, they're destruction. What they're really saying is black people are da-da-da-da. I feel safer walking around the projects in Red Hook. Hand to God, I feel safer walking around the projects in Red Hook than I feel driving in Pennsylvania. Because I'm scared in Pennsylvania. In Red Hook, if you say hello, that's it. That's it. All you got to do is say good morning. So these stereotypes we have, to answer your question, about each other are destructive, and they go on for generations and generations and generations. That's why we read books, because we want to look to the deeper story. So yes, that's part of my history, but it's part of everyone's history as well.
Sir, thank you. Sir.
I'd just say, wow, that's my shout out. And it's really watching this story, this amazing conversation being transformed through our interpreter here. And I'm imagining someone, yes, give it up for them. It's very important, absolutely. We're talking about diversity and coming together. And then someone getting into those stories, reading your book with their hands in Braille, okay? Now we're talking about neurodiversity, okay? How about someone who's a visual learner? How might they engage your stories as a graphic novel? Would that cheapen it, or would that elevate it?
I don't know. I mean, you know, see, this is what happens when someone who's smarter than you asks a question. You know? I mean, they just have to hear and imagine. People who are sight disabled. Was it sight disabled or was it hearing disabled? I can't remember.
Well, I would say sight, if you're talking
I mean,
graphic.
if the words don't lift off the page, then I've failed my job. The hope is that the words will allow them to imagine the tundra, the landscape before them.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Person.
Hello.
Hi.
First I want to say thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to see you. I was assigned to read Color of Water when I was 13 and a freshman in high school. It's been many years since then, but it was definitely life-changing. My question, I guess, is more of a writerly one. I'm a year out of my MFA, and of course I've had to do a lot of recalibrating about that and engaging in my work, but it's already been addressed that you wrote your memoir before fiction, and so often we're told, write what you know, which is kind of vague, I don't know, instruction or advice, but with how your fiction's been so different, I wonder if writing what you know, if like writing that memoir was something you needed to do to like know yourself in order to like open yourself to these very different characters in each of your novels that came after short stories.
Well, that's a very good question, and that's a very thoughtful sort of problem that you're raising. I think that they look, write what you can. You can write what you know, but if you don't know a lot, then the question is, how do you get some stuff on your odometer? And so then, when I was 35 or 36 when The Color of Water was completed, I think. So I had already done a lot of traveling as a journalist and as a musician. I had a lot of experiences to call on. So I was ready at that time to write that book. So if you're straight out of school with an MFA, my suggestion would be to just live as much as you can and keep a good journal. And at some point, you'll decide that I'm ready to do a memoir. Or you'll say, you know, this fiction thing has been just itching at me, and I'll do that. But it'll show. In my case, the memoir was I needed to kind of deal with that before I pushed into fiction. I just had to figure out who I was. And I couldn't figure out who I was until I figured out who my mother was. But in your case, it might be different. I just met a memoirist who, a young lady backstage who teaches at Johns Hopkins who just wrote a memoir, she's an African-American historian, but she's written history books previous. So everyone's different, but I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Hello. My question is, how involved are you in the audiobooks?
Not at all.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
There's a guy named Dominic, I forgot his last name, but he does such a good job that I just usually say to them, can you get him?
They're fantastic.
Oh, okay.
So thank you.
All right, thank you.
We're going to try to get to everybody who's in line presently, but we're not going to be able to take any more questions after that. So thank you. I should have turned to the questions sooner. I should have realized that, like I say, we normally do our work when we don't see eyes. So sorry for that, but please.
Good morning. First and foremost, a little bit of an accolade. I also read The Color of Water, and it's a book that I return to every so often. And, you know, at the risk of sounding a little bit too, you know, fangirly, it really did level up my writing, so thank you. But on to the question. So as we all know, you got your start in memoir, but your memoirs, as well as your nonfiction, they're sourced from a collection of voices. I found that in memoirs, the author might grapple with the plight of the reliable narrator, or putting forth the most distilled narrative for the reader to really interpret. How have you navigated that, both pre and post Color of Water?
That's a good question. I mean, with memoir, you have to be careful that you don't pull out your pistol and just slay the room, you know, because someone you didn't like, or your cousin stole your homework, or, you know, she had her teeth removed, your girlfriend left you, and now look at me now. So that you know, those are the things that you have to avoid when you're writing memoir. Because when you write those kinds of memoirs, you're not writing memoirs. You're just writing vendettas saying, you know, how you like me now. Mm-hmm. And so...
or you could run for president and do that.
Yeah, you could run for president. Yeah, well, you could do that, but, you know, what kind of president would you be? And what kind of memoir would you write? Mm-hmm. You know, so you have to write a book that you, listen, generally, when you're writing about a person, if you can't be in the same room and read that with that person sitting in that room, you probably shouldn't write it. That's really the rule that I kind of go by.
Here we go.
Hi. What shifted for you to be able to write consistently? And knowing what you know now, what's the one thing you wish you knew when you first started writing?
What shifted for me that made me write consistently? Let me see. Look, when you play enough wedding gigs and somebody, you know, you could play Hava Nagila in every key, and they come up to you and you're playing something, you dance, and they play something slow, and they say, you know, if you've done enough of that, and you've done enough gigs where, you know, where you're in Rochester, New York, and the guy who's supposed to pay you vanishes, and then there you are, and then you stand over some guy's house, and he's in the bathtub, and you don't know what he's doing in the bathtub, and then when you walk in there, he's laying in the bathtub, you know, with like his clothes on and out, and you don't know if he's out because he shot a needle in his arm, and you don't have a car. You say, books ain't so bad. So that's really, that's the true answer to your question.
Is that true, really? I kind of believe
Yeah.
you.
When I was on the road, you know, I mean, I never really had, I mean, I wrote songs for Anita Baker and Grover Washington. I had some minor hits, but, you know, I toured with Jimmy Scott. We used to play here. There's a place in D.C. Cool. I forgot the name of the club. It's a Blues Alley. Yeah. I mean, you just can't make enough money. You know, you have to work so hard to be a traveling musician. And if you're a songwriter, you know, you go in, you see people who are 19, 20 years old, and you walk in there, and they, you know, they're telling you what's good, or they're offering you money for your songs. And you know, I've never done a publishing deal in music. All my music is unpublished. In other words, I just refuse to give my songs over for a little. So I'd make money writing books.
Okay,
you know?
fair.
That's it.
Here we go.
So
We have 1 minute to go.
Yeah. We're good.
You talked about your creativity challenges, that you always like to look for the next thing. Well, you have, you know, this very rare combination of being a gifted musician and an especially gifted writer. Have you ever thought of combining the two and coming out with a book that includes the music and/or songs in an audiovisual form?
Well, I wrote a musical 30 years ago. I won the Stephen Sondheim Award, me and a guy named Ed Shockley. But I saw I had no future on Broadway. You know, it wasn't. But I just went back to it and I'm working on it now. It's called Bobos. It's about a kid who wants a pair of expensive tennis shoes. But the problem with Bobos is not the musical. The musical is good. It's sung all the way through. It's got all these different styles of music. The problem is that if you create a Broadway show, do the kids that come to my church in Red Hook, will they ever see it? They won't. So I'm writing it really for high schools. And we're producing it so that high school teachers can take the track and let kids just do the musical in high schools. Because Broadway is not accessible to poor people. It's not accessible to the community that produced me. So why create something for Broadway when there is no, when the closest they'll come to it is to see it, you know, is to some like nonprofit group will take 20 of them to Broadway and they say, we've seen a Broadway show. What's so great about Broadway that they can't do it, that it belongs with the people that created it? So when I first wrote Bobos, and I suppose we'll end here, when I first wrote Bobos, I remember going to theaters where the guys they're playing the kits and the drum, you know, the garbage can tops, that's in the musical. People in the theater, they're watching that, and then they go inside and see Newsies. So how are you going to present Newsies to a kid from Southeast DC who they can't relate to it? You know, so the long and short of it is I've tried to do it, but I've never been a guy who goes out and gets grants and all that kind of stuff. And when Bobos gets produced because I earn the money to do it. And I can do it the way I want, as opposed to some producers saying, well, you know, I've done 10 of these, and, you know, Disney, who cares? You know, everything I've done is because I created it. You know, all the movie, everything, I don't have an agent. I have a literary agent, and that's it. You know, I was with CAS for a while, and they didn't do anything for me, so I just quit.
Well, so I know you said against YouTube, but what about putting it on YouTube, which the kids do watch?
Again, you're talking about the ability to put that together means you got to call 50 people, blah, blah, blah. Just give it to high school music teachers. They'll know what to do with it. High school drama teachers know what to do with good stuff. Okay. It's all about that.
I'm so sorry, ladies, but I'm gonna let this lady who's been very patient have the last word, and we're gonna have the last word. I apologize.
Thank you. I love you. Your characters I grew up in Harlem. Your characters remind me a lot of the people that I grew up with. And I just want to say, this is your best book. I thought I knew everything about James Brown, Black history. No, I read this book and I fell in love with it. So I want to ask you, can you do the same thing that you did for history and James Brown for Josephine Baker?
Well, no, I mean, I don't know if I'm at that point. I mean,
or somebody else.
Well, I mean, you mean Vice President Kamala Harris? Is that what you're talking
can you
about?
do that?
No, there are many more talented people to do that. No, look, I just do what's there. They asked me to do the James Brown book.
This is great. This is beautiful. This is wonderful. It's my favorite.
Kill him and leave. Okay. Thank you. All right. You got so why don't you bring us home with, you have a final thought, something?
No, my final thought is that I'm so glad that you all had nothing else to do to come out here today. I appreciate you, and love is the greatest. It's the greatest novel ever written. Okay. That's it.
James McBride.